Ivana Trump, a woman everyone knew, a socialite, a businesswoman, a mother of 3 children, and of course, the former wife of Donald Trump.
You do. As a boss, you have to be a leader and you have to say what you want. You have to tell them, you have to motivate them. But you also are a woman and you play. So if I did need something out of the man, I would know my way. I would get it. Nice, feminine way. I would get what I wanted.
But few people know that in the final years of her life, she went through love, pain, loyalty, and a tragedy that was barely mentioned in the news. This story isn't about glamour and luxury, it's about a woman who simply wanted to be loved. She was used to shining, used to being first, the wife of a mogul, a model, a social icon. Ivana Trump, a name familiar to anyone who knows anything about New York in the 1980s. But all of that was just a facade. Behind the glitter of wealth was a woman who, in her final years, was no longer searching for money or fame. She just wanted someone to love her, truly, completely, until the end. And, as life often goes, she found that love too late. Ivana Trump was born on February 21, 1949, in Zlin, Czechoslovakia, as Ivana Marie Zelničková. She grew up in a sports boarding school where she developed into a talented skier. In 1971, she married mountaineer Alfred Winkelmeyer to obtain Austrian citizenship and a way out from behind the Iron Curtain. After divorcing in 1972, she moved to Canada, worked as a ski instructor, modeled for Eaton's, and helped promote the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal. That's when people started to notice her. In 1976, Ivana moved to New York and soon met Donald Trump. Their feelings quickly intensified. They fell head over heels in love. They were married in April 1977 at the Marble Collegiate Church. Later, the glamorous couple had 3 children: Donald Jr., 1977, Ivanka, 1981, and Eric, 1984. Ivana became vice president of interior design for Trump Tower, managed the Castle and Plaza hotels, launched her own lines of cosmetics and jewelry, and authored several books. Her journey was called Inspiring from Refugee to Business Empire. Not every woman can do that, right? Then came the early 1990s. America was entering a new decade, filled with stock market optimism, emerging technologies, and daytime soaps. But for Ivana Trump, this period marked the beginning of the end. Not the end of her life, but the end of her carefully curated fairy tale. Her marriage to Donald, which began as a union of strength, ambition, and mutual benefit, began to crack. Their lavish lifestyle yachts, private jets, penthouses, and parties with celebrities masked deeper fractures. Donald was away more often in other cities, in other bedrooms. In 1989, the public learned about his affair with actress and model Marla Maples, and everything became public. A scene at a ski resort in Aspen became iconic. Ivana and Marla came face to face, and Marla told her bluntly, "I love Donald, and he loves me." Public humiliation, wounded pride. Despite her European upbringing and iron self-control, Ivana couldn't contain her emotions. Divorce was inevitable. But it wasn't simple. It became the most talked about divorce in America at the time. The media feasted on every rumor, every document, every public comment. Did Ivana have a prenup? Would she receive a share of Trump's empire? What would the children say? Everyone wanted to know. In the end, she walked away with $14 million in cash, a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, an apartment in Trump Plaza, access to Mar-a-Lago, and full support for all 3 children. Financially, she emerged a winner. But the price was emotional. She was no longer part of the dynasty, no longer Madame Trump. At 42, she became a free woman again. Loneliness came suddenly with the silence of an apartment where no one called her mom in the morning because the children were with Donald. with empty pages in a planner once filled with gala dinners, meetings, and business calls. With the absence of the hand, she used to hold on red carpets. But Ivana didn't break. She began to build her own personal empire. She released her autobiography, The Best Is Yet to Come, launched a line of clothing and cosmetics, started writing a column called Ask Ivana, and gave interviews around the world. She was no longer just the ex-wife of a future president. She was becoming a brand in her own right. In 1995, she married again. Her husband was Riccardo Masuchelli, an Italian businessman and builder, but the marriage lasted less than 2 years and ended in court. She later filed a $15 million lawsuit against him, claiming he had violated a confidentiality agreement, and partially won. It wasn't a union, more like a legal war. Then came Count Goffredo Gaetani dell'Aquila d'Aragona Lovatelli, an aristocrat she was engaged to but never married. He died in 2005. Ivana began to joke that she only had luck with dead men, a joke that masked deep disappointment. She kept appearing in public, at fashion shows and on TV, but people increasingly labeled her eccentric, out of touch. Her look, the big hair, leopard print outfits, fur coats became a meme in the New York press. No longer taken seriously as a businesswoman, she was seen as a relic of the 80s. Ivana seemed to be fading into the past. But no one knew that inside her still lived a strong, vibrant woman, just one who was very, very lonely. She wanted love, not spectacle, not fame. By the early 2000s, not another glossy Ivana cover, was no longer just at the center of attention. Real human closeness. People still recognized her, and it was during that period, New York, in the early 2000s, she maintained a social life. That fate brought her Trump an unexpected the brand of the 1,980s had ended. Change her life. Her children name was Rossano. Donald had married Melania, and Ivana was alone, officially free, but in reality, lost. She had long since stopped believing in true love. The men who came and went were either too young to understand her or too old to spark anything in her. And then, as if by chance, came Rossano Rubicondi. He was young, charismatic, Italian, a true Roman beauty with a temper. Born in Rome in 1972, he grew up in a creative family, dreamed of a career in show business, moved to London, and later to New York to find himself. That's where they met. She was 53. He was 29. But who was counting? They met at one of the many social events. It was loud, crowded, and everyone was performing, but he, somehow, was real. He smiled, he listened, he spoke simply. And Ivana suddenly felt she didn't need to pretend with him. He wasn't afraid of her name. He didn't admire her like an icon. He simply saw her as a woman. Real, vulnerable. Their relationship grew slowly. No headlines, no pressure. But soon they became a couple. Ivana glowed. At events, she laughed again. She talked to the press more willingly, began writing new chapters of her book, started learning Italian. He lived between New York and Miami, opened a restaurant, appeared in shows, and she supported him. The press, of course, mocked her. She found herself a toy boy. He's using her. She's just bored. But they were together for 6 years, and they didn't break up. Even when he left for months to Italy, they stayed close. Even when he flirted with others, she forgave him. Everything pointed toward marriage, and eventually, they got married. On April 12, 2008, Ivana and Rossano tied the knot in one of the most luxurious places in America, Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's estate. He attended the ceremony too, as her ex-husband. Their children were present. More than 400 guests came. Everything looked like a movie: white rose arches, golden tableware, Italian music, champagne flowing. Ivana wore a 50-0 dress and was walked down the aisle by Donald Jr. The ceremony was conducted in English, Italian, and Czech. Rossano beamed. He seemed genuinely in love, or at least completely confident in what he was doing. The media jumped again. 24-year age gap. He's using her. She just can't be alone. But Ivana didn't care. She said, "I'm happy. I'm a woman who knows how to love." But behind the scenes, things were not so peaceful. First, there was tension between Rossano and her children, especially Ivanka. They thought he was superficial and cared mostly about status and money. He felt alienated, like no one in her family took him seriously. Second, their lifestyles clashed. Ivana was a woman of routine, comfort, and calm. Rossano was clubs, chaos, impulsive decisions. He still wanted to live. She had already lived. Misunderstanding grew. He left for filming. She got angry. He refused to sign legal agreements. She demanded security. He wanted freedom. She wanted control. And all of it led to one thing. In December 2008, just 7.5 months after the wedding, they filed for divorce. Quietly. No public statements. Just a simple, "We don't need this on paper." But ironically, they stayed together even after the divorce. He visited her. She visited him. They had dinners together, went on walks, attended events. Ivana later said, "We separated formally, but he remained part of my life forever. He wasn't just a man, he was my friend, my boy, my pain, and my joy." And he said in one interview, "We had a connection you'll never understand. Because you want to measure everything in marriage, age, or status. But we just lived until the end." For a few years after the divorce, Rossano continued his career. He appeared on the Italian version of Celebrity Survivor, opened a restaurant in Miami, and remained a staple in celebrity tabloids, tanned, stylish, always with someone new. But something changed. His eyes looked tired, his body weaker. He didn't shine the same way. Ivana saw it, though she never said it out loud. They stayed in touch. Sometimes they called. Sometimes they met. Sometimes they didn't speak for months, like two people who know each other so well that no words are needed. Then in 2019, Rossano started feeling real pain. A dark mole appeared on his back. At first, he ignored it. He didn't like doctors, didn't believe in checkups. He was sure, "I'm immortal." But the mole grew. Then came swelling. Then chest pain. And finally, the diagnosis: melanoma, late stage. Half a year later came the secondary diagnosis: liver cancer. The disease progressed quickly, very quickly. He tried to hide it. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't post anything on social media. As always, he wanted to appear strong. But in reality, he was losing weight, strength, and interest in life. The medical care in Italy did what it could, but what he really needed was serious care. He lived alone, and one day he simply called her. Ivana didn't ask a single question. She immediately sent him tickets. He flew to New York. An apartment was rented near her home. Every day, she came to see him. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she just sat silently beside him. Sometimes she spoke, like in the old days, about restaurants, gossip, politicians. But her voice no longer carried lightness. There was something maternal in it, something heavy, as if she understood the end was near. She cared for him like a nurse, like a wife, like a person who didn't care what others might say. Her friends didn't understand. "Why are you doing this?" And she answered, "Because when I was in pain, he always came back to me. Now it's his turn." Rossano was fading, literally. He melted away. He was no longer the sun-kissed charmer who dazzled at social parties. He became fragile, almost transparent. He didn't smile anymore. He smoked. Even when doctors begged him to stop, even when it was killing him. He had a habit. He would open the window, wrap himself in a scarf, and blow smoke into the sky, as if reminding himself that he was still alive. Ivana got angry. Sometimes she scolded him, but she never left. Her son, Eric, once told her, "Mom, you do realize he'll never change?" She just shrugged. "That's not why I'm here. I just don't want him to die alone." The final months were full of silence. She no longer took him to restaurants, didn't invite photographers. He lay in bed. She sat beside him. He whispered. She held his hand. And one October day in 2021, he simply didn't wake up. He was only 49 years old. The media covered it briefly. A few lines in the Italian press. Even fewer in American outlets. Official cause of death: melanoma with metastases, complicated by liver failure. Some sources claim there was also a vascular embolism, But the truth is, he was killed by indifference, by cigarettes, and by loneliness. But not completely. Because in his final months, she was there. The woman he had met 20 years earlier. The one they all called old, strange, too rich to love. She, who proved that love isn't measured in time, age, marriage certificates, or appearances. She didn't issue a statement, didn't post condolences on Instagram, didn't invite the press to the funeral. She simply closed the door to her home and stopped going out. Friends said she changed, not just sad, scorched, as if with him, the last part of her that was still alive had also died. He wasn't just a man, he was her choice. A late one, imperfect, but real. After Rossano's death in October 2021, Ivana Trump seemed to disappear. Not physically, she still lived in her luxurious Manhattan apartment on the Upper East Side, but as a person she vanished. Everyone who knew her noticed the change. Her glamorous, extravagant style didn't go anywhere. She still wore furs, high heels, flawless makeup, but behind the facade was a shadow, an emptiness. A silent grief she never voiced, but couldn't escape. When people asked her about Rossano, she answered briefly, "He was my person, my last joy, that's all." She no longer attended parties, no more interviews. Occasionally, very rarely, she was seen having lunch at the same restaurant, Altessi Ristorante, 3 minutes from her home. She always sat at the same table, by the window, ordered the same dishes, soup, light salad, a glass of white wine, always alone. No one dared approach. Even the waiters knew this was a silence, not to be disturbed. Sometimes she carried a cane, sometimes had an assistant. Once, paparazzi captured her barely holding onto a railing as she climbed steps. Doctors called it loss of coordination. But it wasn't about her body, it was about her soul. After her divorce from Donald Trump in the early 1990s, Ivana faced a choice that millions of women around the world know all too well: how to raise children alone, preserve her identity, and keep them from feeling that their world had collapsed. But in her case, this wasn't just any divorce. It was one of the loudest, most scandalous, and publicized divorces in America, under the scrutiny of cameras, tabloids, and venomous headlines. She lost the man she once loved. She lost her status as New York's First Lady of High Society. But she did not lose the most important thing: her 3 children. Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump. The children she had with Trump became her meaning, her support, and her main life project. Ivana often said in interviews, "I created these children. I put everything into them: character, style, ambition. They're not just my children. They are my pride." Her parenting style was strict. She didn't believe in softness for the sake of comfort. She believed in discipline. Every child had to know who they were and where they were going. She didn't allow laziness, whining, or using their surname as a shield. In one interview, she said, "The Trump name is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. If you carry it, you must live up to it." Donald Trump Jr. Her eldest, Donald Jr., felt the double pressure from an early age, being the firstborn and carrying his father's name. He grew up in a world where the surname was both a dream and a curse. After the divorce, Donald Jr. became distant from his father. It's said that he didn't speak to him for years. He blamed him for his mother's pain, the public humiliation, and for leaving the family for another woman, Marla Maples. Ivana, according to her own words, had to pull him out of that emotional pit. She taught him that hatred doesn't lead to freedom, and the only way to outgrow his father was to become stronger. At the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied business, he tried to prove his independence. Still, he joined the family business, the Trump Organization, and rose to executive vice president. He oversaw real estate deals, golf course developments, and construction projects. Outwardly, he was continuing his father's legacy. Inwardly, he was still searching for himself. During Donald Trump's presidential campaign, Donald Jr. was one of his most vocal supporters. He appeared at rallies, gave interviews, and ran an aggressive social media campaign. That made him a hero to some and a target to others. Accusations of racism, harshness, and populism followed him. But one thing was clear: he played his role to the end. His personal life was also rocky. His marriage to Vanessa Hayden, with whom he had 5 children, ended in divorce in 2018. Like Ivana before him, he became a father without a family. But unlike his mother, he didn't seek warmth. He dove into politics and business. In interviews, he often referred to Ivana as his anchor in childhood. She taught him, in his own words, to be tough but fair. Ivanka Trump. Ivanka was special, the only daughter, her mother's favorite, a mirror reflection of Ivana, only in a softer, American version. From childhood, Ivana poured everything into her. Style, taste, manners. Ivanka studied at the best schools, modeled for magazines, walked the runways, but remained a diligent student. Unlike other daughters of wealthy families, she avoided scandal. Everything was under control. Ivana used to say, "Ivanka is my pride. She's smart, she's beautiful, and she knows what she wants." Ivana insisted that Ivanka attend the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, like her father. After graduation, Ivanka launched her own fashion brand. She wrote books on women and success, spoke at conferences, and became the symbol of the new working woman. Her most controversial role came in politics. In 2016, Ivanka joined her father's campaign and later became his senior advisor in the White House. That decision divided public opinion. To some, she was a modernizer who could soften Trump's edges. To others, she was a loyal daughter whitewashing a harsh administration. In recent years, Ivanka has stepped away from public life. After her father left the presidency, she moved to Florida with her husband Jared Kushner and their children. Friends say she grew tired of constant scrutiny and simply wanted to be a mother. Yet her image as a smart, calculating, and poised Lady Trump remains a part of history. Her bond with her mother was always strong. On the day Ivana died, Ivanka posted, "My mother was a brilliant, charming, passionate woman. She taught me to be a woman with a voice, a woman who is not afraid to move forward." Eric Trump. Ivana's youngest son, Eric, was always in the background, less visible, less public. He grew up feeling like the third wheel in a family where attention usually went to Ivanka and Donald Jr. But Ivana gave him just as much love. She said, "Eric is my kindest child, the most loyal. He doesn't push forward, but he's always there when needed." He graduated from Georgetown University and joined the Trump Organization, focusing mainly on real estate and hotel development. He stayed out of the media, gave fewer interviews, and avoided scandal. His image was that of a devoted son, calm, practical, and steady. He also founded a charitable foundation, supporting children's hospitals and medical programs. During his father's presidency, Eric also supported the family publicly, but unlike his siblings, he did so quietly. His wife, Lara Trump, became a notable figure in the Republican Party and even hosted a show on Fox News. Eric remained in the shadows, but many say he was the glue holding the family together. After his mother's death, Eric appeared particularly shaken. He didn't make public statements, but sources say he visited her the most in recent years. He was there when she was sick. He helped around the house. He was just there not for the cameras, but as a son. Legacy of a mother. Though Ivana aimed to raise her children equally, the Trump household was competitive by nature. That culture came from Donald Sr. Life is business. Family is corporation. Even post-divorce, the children lived in the shadow of that ethos, to compete, to win, to dominate. But within that harsh outer shell, there was another force: Ivana's quiet balance. When Ivanka cried from pressure, Ivana called her every night. When Donald Jr. returned from exhausting meetings, she made him pasta like she did in childhood. When Eric didn't know what to do, she simply listened. There were conflicts between the brothers, sometimes sharp. Donald Jr. saw Eric as the junior, not fit for big decisions. Eric thought his brother was too harsh. Ivanka often played the mediator. She talked to both. And perhaps the most emotionally mature person in this male-driven family was the daughter. Ivana knew that their bond wasn't just about the name. It was about shared pain. All three had lived through the public collapse of a family. They grew up in a home with both love and pressure. Ivana often told them, "Don't let the outside world destroy what you have inside." When Ivana Trump died in July 2022, her children were the first to arrive. Eric came first, then Donald Jr., then Ivanka. None of them gave big statements. The media tried to get reactions. But Ivana's children, as she taught them, stood tall. What needed to be said was said later at the funeral, in gestures, in flowers, in silence. Ivanka called it the greatest loss of her life. She was a true lady, a true fighter, and a true mother. Donald Jr. went quiet for weeks. No interviews, no posts. Then, finally, he said, "Mom was stronger than we ever knew, and we didn't always appreciate that." Eric was among the first on the scene. He organized transport, talked to police, talked to neighbors. He didn't just lose a mother, he lost his greatest anchor. According to those close to him, he stood under her window for a long time, unable to go inside. There was property, jewelry, wealth, but what Ivana left behind was deeper, a sense of order, of duty, of pride in one's name. Today, her three children are grown, wealthy, and public figures. Each has their own life, but in all of them lives a piece of Ivana, Donald, tough, bold, but vulnerable. Ivanka, elegant, composed, but sensitive. Eric, quiet, dependable, unseen, but deep. They grew up under the flash of cameras. Their lives are woven into America's story. But at the core was one woman, one spine, and one truth she taught them from childhood. It doesn't matter how much money you have. What matters is what you can say when you look in the mirror. Ivana Trump was a woman of her time, but to her children, she was just mom. Time has passed since Ivana left. New York moves on. The towers where she once hosted receptions no longer bear her name. Glossy magazines no longer feature her. The news has moved on to newer scandals. Everything changes. But some things remain. In the places where her voice once echoed, where her perfume once lingered, where the kitchen once rattled with pans, there is silence now. But memory speaks louder than sound. In the hearts of those who knew her, she remains alive. For her children, her passing marked a new beginning. Only after she left did they truly grasp who she had been. Not just the ex-wife of a billionaire, not just a socialite, but a woman who survived migration, hunger, cold, divorce, betrayal, loneliness, and through it all stood tall. Donald Jr. continues in politics and business, facing criticism and chaos. He is a reflection of his father's line, yet he carries the strength of the woman who taught him to endure. Ivanka has stepped away, living in Florida, raising children, almost invisible in the public eye. She chose peace, a luxury earned by a mother who fought every day. Eric remains steady, quiet, rarely in the news, rarely speaks of himself, but he still speaks to his mother in thoughts, in dreams, in memory. He was with her at the end. And perhaps he understood her best. Ivana Trump's life was like a novel, beautiful, dramatic, at times almost like a fairy tale. And her children are like chapters of that book, each with their own story, but all written by the same hand, a mother's hand. In the future, when people speak of the Trump name of power, wealth, politics, perhaps someone will remember her, the woman behind the curtain, without whom none of it would exist. She wasn't perfect, but she was real. And her three children are the living proof of that truth.
I never had a problem with men. It's like, that's great, but I never had a problem with the woman either. I have a lot of wonderful ladies friends.